All righty. Well, that's the voice of Claudia Ewen,
Yes, it
our
is.
our master coach
Welcome.
and our managing broker. Welcome. So we had a
Thank you.
conversation last month. I said I'd like to just kind of go through where a lot of agents just think that the only way and the only time their buyer can get out of the contract is during that 10-day inspection period and the Binzer process. Not necessarily the case, and the contract outlines a lot of different timetables, a
Yep.
lot of things that need to get done, and failure to do so, or the buyer has the ability to disapprove certain things. So I wanted to walk us through it, and I'm going to hand you this, but I wanted to just, before we get going on getting out of contracts, so here's the scenario. I have this buyer.
Thank you for your scenarios, by the way. You always have the greatest scenarios.
We
So
have to cut that.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I have a buyer. We go take a look at a home, falls in love with it. We make an offer, and we just got outbidded by another buyer. So that contract, other buyers under contract. So then my buyer finds another house. We go through the process. We're under contract. 3 days prior to the close of escrow, house A, for some reason, falls out of contract. Now, there's two scenarios. One, what do I do if my buyer calls me and says, I want to go back after that house? Or maybe because I typically 3-4 days prior to, I turn off the subscription in the MLS. But what if I'm aware? What if the agent calls me and says, "Hey, your buyer's still interested. It's back on the market," and I know house B, we're 3 days prior to close of escrow. Sure. Am I required? Or should I even say anything to my buyer? And I'm sure we get this situation quite a bit because I could tell by Todd's face.
Yeah. So simple answer. What's best for your client? Fiduciary. You owe them that responsibility of honesty. I would always bring it up. You don't want them to close escrow and then find out it was on the market and say, hey, you didn't let me know. Yes, there could be outs for them. They could speak to legal counsel. They could do something. If that is their dream house, that is the one they want. But there's a lot of things to look at, not just the brick and mortar of the house, right? The transaction. Can they recreate that deal? Did they get a really good deal on that house? Is it worth it going to the other one? So there's a lot to think about, not only the repercussions, because there will be repercussions. It's not just about the earnest money. And that's why they need to speak to legal counsel, especially at that point. I mean, any point in the game, there's a flag on the play. You want to make sure that you check it out. But at that very last moment, I mean, it does happen. I mean, if they fall in love with the house, I get it. But there's a way out, and that's going to involve legal counsel. It's no longer as easy as black and white print.
Yeah, and remember that we used to only have a fiduciary duty to clients. Now we have a contractual duty to buyers. So it changes the game totally. Fiduciary duty was 2 years of limitations. Contract law, 6 years of limitations. So, in essence, Mike, just in quick, I would say, yes, tell your client. However, in that same breath, and follow it up in an email so that you have documented the conversation, that they need to seek a real estate attorney to understand their risks of trying to get out of this deal. Because Claudia, you made it right. It's not about the earnest money. They're not really walking away from earnest money. Look at the section breach in the back of the contract. It says that the purpose for earnest money is because damages would be difficult for a seller to fix. The seller may, at the seller's sole interest, accept the earnest money as a sole thing. The seller's not going to do that. If you harm them way down at the end of the contract and they can't go to their next house and there's a domino and a loss of earnest money on that deal and so forth, yeah, there's going to be a lot of damages in that earnest money.
Arrow button. Down arrow button.
Yeah, they're not going to take it.
Unless Nick messed up the... Okay, the second caveat to that question is, am I required to know about it? What if, I don't monitor all my searches, and I'm not monitoring, a week prior to close of escrow. I'm not going in the MLS and taking a look at other houses we made offers on to find out. So what if close escrow, he goes, hey, well, this house came back on the market 3 days ago. And I'm like, well, I didn't know.
No, of course not. If your client tells you, "Hey, I need you to keep an eye on this," that's a client instruction. But no, you can't know what's happening in the market at every second. Like it could go back on the market the minute that it's going to record the new one. You can't know that. So
Okay.
no.
Good call.
Yeah. Also, remember the client went under contract. They did what was necessary to go through all the steps to go under contract on whatever home they're on now.
Right. And that's where I'm saying that buyer client needs to really gauge and wage what is going on. It's not as simple as, oh, I just want this one now. Okay, no, we'll think about every step we went through. Are you willing to do that again? And yada, yada with legal counsel. So there are some other contingencies in the contract I did not include on here, which is your buyer contingency addendum, right? That's a way to get out. There's also the short sale addendum, which is another contingency. It's contingent upon that short sale approval. And then you have things like executed backup offer. So those, you can always fall out of those with notice, right? But the most popular by far is going to be buyer due diligence. That first 10 days or whatever you put on line 213 of the purchase contract, which, by the way, guys, hot off the presses, look in transaction desk, AAR forms, whatever, new version today. Well, February 1st.
Another one?
Minor change. I was going to just talk to it real quick. It's a minor change. You could say it didn't even warrant it, but they want to put it in here. So the 7D, the small claims, I can't read, small claims division, it went up to 5,000. It used to be 35. So small claims up to 5,000. And you're going to notice your very last page, signature page of the contract and the lease agreement, all of the contracts, the vacant land contract, page 10 or the last page now states, instead of broker on behalf of buyer or broker on behalf of seller, it now reads, broker represents buyer and will receive compensation from the transaction.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's not saying who, right? It's not saying who's paying it, but they're getting compensation from the transaction. So that's new. Yep. Just wanted to point that out for you guys. So due diligence, yes. If you leave it boilerplate, 10 days. Now, we've been asked this before, especially from listing agents just waiting for that vendor to come through, and it doesn't come through. And it's like, they only have 10 days, right? Like, yeah, they have 10 days. Well, what if they don't respond? What if they don't send me something? Well, there you go. I got everything from the purchase contract, guys. I read through it, highlighted. All the answers are there. You know, you say there's a form for that? Yeah, everything is in the contracts. That buyer advisory, if you've ever read through it, has everything you're ever going to need to know. So when you call in and ask, what can they cancel for? Maybe they found another property, right? Mm-hmm. It's never going to be advised to have, you cannot have more than one escrow open. That's not good practice.
I think what you're saying, and ultimately to the agent, the buyer's agent in that case, is it's not about the property or the premises or the surrounding areas. It could be anything, like Mike's point, a property that they preferred just came back on the market. They can use any reason whatsoever, to make their decision to cancel.
Right, but disapproved items.
You're talking about during the inspection period, right?
Yeah, I'm just that's what we're talking about right
during
now.
During the inspection period, but it has to be listed on the BINSR page 1.
Correct.
You have to list the disapproved items. Failure to do so means you're continuing forward without asking for any repairs.
And failure to put the reason on the BINSR, it means you're putting your buyer in a situation where they're walking away from their earnest money.
It must be noted. Mm-hmm. It must be listed there. So that's important to look at. The unfulfilled loan contingency is the second. It's again, it does happen. You know, buyers' situations change or they look further in and now they cannot qualify. They need a loan denial from their lender, and we need the unfulfilled loan contingency addendum that we would add. And then you would need your title company's proof of earnest deposit refund or disbursement. Where did that money go to? We can't cancel out the file and call it officially done or dead in the water unless we have that from title company.
Right. Okay. And then on the unfilled loan contingency, we've talked about this several times. When your buyer receives the unfilled loan contingency from the lender, and you submit it to the seller, basically saying we're canceling the contract because our buyer cannot get the loan, you are not required, and I would advise you to never share with the seller why they were denied the loan. You're not required. All you're required to do is provide the documentation. Now, there are some agents, and there's a temptation, like going back to my initial scenario where they talk their lender into doing this, but they really can get a loan, but they're using this as a way out. How dangerous is that?
What are you looking for, Todd?
Well, the point is under the unfulfilled loan contingency.
You got to get closer to the mic.
Under the thank you. I'm new to
You're a
this.
rookie.
That it does say that there's I can't see it on here, where is it? But it's that they do have to provide a reason for the unfulfilled loan contingency also.
Well,
that's part of the contract. It's in the contract itself.
I can't read.
Oh, let's move on because I've never heard.
But yeah,
I've never
so
heard
if you
that.
Before we
Look
get
at
too
your-
far,
Yeah.
Claudia had mentioned a new document that had been updated by AAR. That document is now in transaction desk, right, Claudia?
Yes, sir. I checked
If-
this morning.
If I have an open escrow, I have active contracts. I don't need to update those documents with this new one. I just
No.
need to use it moving forward, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank
Going
you.
forward. Yeah, do not go back retrograde. It's
The
going
answer is
forward.
there also in the very last line, but it says optional,
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
not
so
required.
as we go on, appraisal contingency. Now this does happen. In some cases, it's a lot more stringent than others. VA and FHA are going to be a little bit harder to tackle that appraisal and appeal that because they have specific time frames and it stays with the record of the house longer. So for VA, it's called Tidewater. And if you don't know what that is, reach out to your lenders. Get a good info session, guys. We should know this information. But if the appraisal comes in short, yes, there's a shortfall on the additional clause addendum where if a buyer really wants this house, they're willing to go $5,000, right? If it falls short, they're willing to put $5,000 into it. You can do that kind of thing, but the client needs to make sure that again they've looked at all of the options, right? Make sure that that is what they want to do. Because you don't want them coming back after close of
Right.
escrow saying, oh, this is not the scenario that I wanted. This isn't the transaction I wanted to agree to. So appraisal contingency is there. It can be used on cash as well. Additional clause addendum has a nice little paragraph in there that it can be subject to appraisal. So that's something to look at. A lot of people don't know and don't even look into the title commitment, the CC&Rs. If your client, and it happened early on in my career, I sold a home with an RV gate. Perfectly happy. Then their parents came down for 6 months. They were going to park their RV there. It was great. Little did I know that HOA does not allow RV parking. So it's really not an RV gate. It's the size of the gate is big enough for an RV, but not allowed to park there. So that was a huge debacle. We figured it out. I did pay for 6 months of RV storage for them because I did not know the difference. I did not point it out. Hey guys, your CC&Rs. I sold
good
them
one.
what I thought was an RV gate and RV parking. I didn't pay attention. So ever since then, yeah, I have a grudge against some of those new home builders. Why do you say RV gate?
And the important part about
MLS
this,
does too.
about these items and these things that I really wanted to highlight is the appraisal contingency or receiving the CC&Rs from the title company can happen after the inspection period.
yeah.
So that's my point. Just because the inspection period has come and gone, well, I've had it on day 11, day 12. My buyer has had a change of heart. Now I'm going back and going, okay, did we get the appraisal yet? Did we get our title commitment and title insurance and looking at dates because they've got 5 days from receipt of these documents.
From
Any
receipt.
change, yep.
And that brings us into the next one, which is I think one of the most not popular, but it comes up a lot more, I think, than the loan contingency. So if you're past your due diligence, if you're a listing agent, you get that spuds out when? Within 3 days. 3 days of contract. That's not just the number we put in the contract. That's there because the buyer has 5 days from review of that spuds to present any disapproved items, any disapproved terms that they don't agree to. What if it had a previous leak in the property? It's no longer active, but they're highly sensitive to mold or growth or humidity, or they're very worrisome. A lot of people from the East Coast come here, they hear mold, they're out. They don't want to even know about it because it's a much bigger problem up there. So you have to be really, really careful that you, as a listing agent, get that spuds out and the loss claims history out with that early time period, 3 days. If not, you're extending that questionable period, that due diligence period where they can back out. If you wait and don't give them the spuds until day 10 of your inspection, guess what? They have 5 more days.
Just for that document.
But
Just for that document. Yeah.
unless on day 11 they send the Binzer, right? Because once they send the Binzer, I would assume that the spuds issue is over.
The Binzer should be on day 10. It can't be day 11.
No, what I'm saying is, if I don't get the spuds until day 10, and I know that I've now got a 15-day inspection period because I've just received the spuds, but I send the Binzer on day 11, then it's over. I'm done. Because you said if the inspection period, if I don't get the spuds, right, the spuds can extend the inspection period.
Well, no, the inspection period ends once that Binzer gets turned in or the 10th day.
Right.
Like that's the due diligence.
Okay,
for
then what happens
inspection.
when I get the spuds on day
You
10?
can notice of cancellation.
There's a section also. There's two of them. They're both called changes. One's under the lender section, which any changes to the lenders, to anything doing with your loan that's going to affect the seller's costs or your ability to close, you have to get permission from the seller, or sometimes you can just notice them. But there's another changes in the contract which just deals with absolutely any information that you were not made privy to until, it might be before or after the inspection period. But since we're talking about after the inspection period today,
Right.
you have 5
All right,
days.
well, I
from
know what
receipt
I'm
on
asking,
that
so we'll
one
talk about
document.
Look
afterwards.
at line 156.
Yeah.
156 answers your question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. For the SPDS.
For the SPDS. So at 5 days after
Same
receipt
thing
of the
with insurance
spuds, whichever is later.
Okay.
You're just recommending that all of the things that are in the contract that have a date in which the seller's supposed to perform and getting it to the buyer, you get that no later than 5 days, in the inspection period, because then
Right.
that means
It's going to extend it.
that it's not going to.
It won't
Yeah,
extend
yeah.
your buyer
Right.
due diligence per inspection, but they still have the right, those 5 days from receipt of those documents.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Same with the affidavit of disclosure. Doesn't happen often, but that is also something that needs to be turned in, and the buyer can cancel on that. So that's just another one of the not outs, but things that a buyer needs to consider. Because again, this is their investment, right?
Yep.
We're dealing with people's hard-earned money and stuff. So risk of loss, that's always going to be one. It is up to the estates and the heirs to continue forward if they're going to. Never had it happen where it was forced to happen. If somebody wanted out, they can. But again, that is the case where you're going to seek legal counsel to make sure. There's a lot of questions that go on when something happens like that. And it could be risk of loss of property. And I'm talking also like the estates and the actual buyers and sellers, it does happen. I had a client at the closing table signing documents. He started having heart pain. We had to stop the signing, and it was, thank goodness he was fine, but those things do happen. So again, terms of acceptance, if you don't get something signed and accepted within that time frame, is that contract alive? Is that offer still live?
No.
It's actually withdrawn.
Right. You can account for that if they missed it by a couple, overnight. They didn't get it to you till the next morning. You can counter back and extend that time frame, right? But look at the contract. So again, if you read through, you're going to find a lot of your answers. I highly encourage, if you have buyers, even if you don't have buyers and you haven't, read through that buyer advisory line by line. The purchase contract, that first page that everyone just skips over or throws out or doesn't even print, very important. Have your clients look at it and check mark off so they're aware, we have to look at a preliminary title report.
Mm-hmm.
We have to know what's going to be needed to transfer title. Yeah, you have to know. Right? So make sure you're doing those checks and balances. Make sure you're not the only source. You want to provide the source. The source is our contract. So make sure whenever you are dealing with contracts, I like to quote the contract per line so-and-so of the contract and then go on from there. A lot of people will ask me, what do I actually use to give notice of cancellation or whatnot? You're going to use a notice disclosure. So if you find that one of the parties is non-compliant, right? We haven't received spuds. We're past our time period. You can cure for that. Cure is to resolve and to acknowledge the noncompliance. And then after that 3 days of the cure, you can send a notice disclosure with cancellation. There has to be a step process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I'm going to send you an email, I'm canceling. That's not how you cancel. You have to do it per the contract.
I'm finding, so I had a situation, and I don't know. I'd love your thoughts on whether this is a good strategy or not.
These, they don't scare me. I feel like, not that you trigger me, but I'm waiting now. I'm very, very anxious. Let's see what goes on.
Okay, so I recently had one, and it was over the holidays. It was over Christmas and New Year, so it just time gets away from you sometimes, right? And so I'm representing the buyer, and we do our initial, take a look at the property. It was, long story short, we didn't actually, because he was a GC, so we didn't do an inspection. He wanted to just do it himself because it was a flip. It was going to be a rehab, a flip.
Sure.
And so, during the HOA process of getting the documents, the HOA disclosure basically just stated that all homes that have not been painted since 2001 need to be painted, the exterior. And I'm thinking, well, I don't remember how the quality of the paint job. And so the seller just said, oh yeah, asked for documentation. Yeah, I'm getting it to you. So now I'm like 2-3 days prior to close of escrow. I'm like, I'm like, I don't want to get in trouble. So I actually drove down there and I'm like, this house was not painted in the last 5 years. So I took it upon myself. I called the HOA and said, do you have any records of any applications? And they said, no, your buyer is going to have to paint this house. And I said, send me documentation ASAP. And they sent me the documentation. So I used that as a disapproved item to renegotiate.
Sure.
That information fell under the 5-day change under changes in the contract because it was so late. And the seller did, the buyer did at that particular point. They got new information that was a requirement that was not discussed during the negotiating period of the contract. As a result, the buyer has an opportunity to walk away or potentially sit down. That's what they have the ability to do, is walk away. But most sellers at that late stage of the game aren't going to want to walk away. They usually will.
So then as a buyer's agent, should we maybe, especially if it's in question, just call the HOA and ask them to do a visual inspection of the property?
If it's important to the client, yes. So the client should be calling their future HOA. They can do that. They can call. I highly encourage that buyer. It's called buyer due diligence for a reason. That buyer should exert some energy, some interest into what's going on with their new HOA. So they can definitely call and get that information. You will get the HOA disclosure provides any and all violations or things that need to happen. If it's stated on there that the property is in violation because it has not been painted, which they do every 10 years, then that's something that, again, has been now brought to light and has to be negotiated, figured out between the two parties. Who's responsible? Ultimately, it still is the seller's home.
All right. And the reason I bring this up, because here's the other situation.
Of course. There's always a caveat.
No, I mean a different transaction.
Oh.
So, and this is why I'm like, I think I'm just going to start having the buyers call the HOA during the inspection period. So, close of escrow, buyers are signing at the same time the HOA is doing a visual inspection. Okay, there's no way to know that this is going on. There's been nothing in the HOA disclosures of any items that the HOA wants fixed or anything like that. HOA disclosures, everything's good. But then HOA catches wind that, hey, we're going to have a new end user on this, and they go out and cite exterior paint,
missing landscaping.
Landscaping that needed to be replaced. I mean, we're talking about some big ticket items here.
Sure.
And the buyer is like, there was no way to know because it literally was going on while the buyer was signing. So for me, I'm like, okay, if during the inspection period, just call the HOA and say, do a drive-by.
Sure. Yep. And see, the thing is, guys, so the buyer has already had an opportunity to look at the HOA rules and regs. So they know that that is going to be requirement to keep up their home, to not, to get things approved. They know that they're walking into an HOA that has rules and regs. Mm-hmm. So if it happens the minute after they sign or the minute after it records, they're aware of that. Now, could that still be negotiated? Possibly they could still talk to the other side because it does land, okay, well, they should have known this, but they didn't do a drive-by. So yes, you could probably still negotiate something between the two parties or have the seller buyer hash it out after the fact in small claims if they want to. But that is something that hopefully it doesn't happen, and hopefully they do some homework and drive around or make the calls, because again, that's buyer due diligence. Very important.
All righty. I think you have it. All right.
There you go. That's the cure part. Seek legal counsel.
All right. We're the
Catch
little
all.
pauses of
Yeah.
getting my hands on the keyboard. All right, Claudia. Really, really, really good stuff.
was
I love
fun.
this stuff.
Yeah,
So this is
thank you,
great.
guys.
Yep.
All right. Well, we leave everybody with the quote of the day. Your expertise is your edge. Own it. Go out. Sell a home.